Please welcome Rick Robinson.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everybody. It's Saturday. We're waiting to get home. Everyone's a little chill and relaxed. I have some notes. I don't think I need the notes. It's a double-edged sword. I'm last, so the room is small but mighty. But I've been here the whole time, and I can comment and reflect on what everybody's had to say and share. So I have a headline. I think it's a big message for a little room at the moment. My headline is this: the digital out-of-home revolution is more important than the introduction of television in the 50s. And I'll say that again. The digital out-of-home revolution is more important, more powerful, more significant socially, economically, contextually than the introduction of television was in the 1950s. And just think about that for a minute. You know, we make our living out in the public space. We live in the people's space. It's their space, not ours. And we occupy it, and we have to earn the right to be there. And when people are out and about, they're alert, they're active, they're going through this visual triage all day long, right? They're in the flight or fright mode. Hey, what does this mean to me? Is this friend? Is this foe? Does it make sense? Is it dangerous? Do I care? Who's that? That's ugly. I don't know. What's going on? They're navigating the world visually. We are more visual than anything else. Think about this. If there's a big noise in the room next to you, what do? You go look to see what it was. We trust our eyes. And that's how we consume everything around us. And we do it at scale. Life happens when we're out of the house. And now if you look at the collective power of digital out of home, from all the screens we've heard about the last 3 days, all over the globe, all the examples you all showed, from the thoughtful test and repeat from Olipop, the immediacy of Wendy's, music all over the globe in just a few days, that's an immense power and an immense responsibility. But we can reach the world tomorrow. And that's amazing. Nothing can do what digital out of home can do. I would offer that digital out of home is like a Ferrari idling in a parking lot. That's how little we're using it now compared to how powerful it can be. A Ferrari idling in a parking lot, right? It's just waiting there for us. We have so much muscle that we haven't exercised yet as a medium. And I think you can see that happening contextually, speed to market, relevance to current events, the immediacy, the news power of it, and how it relates to what's happening with cities. Like the relationship between people and cities and digital out of home is changing. We're teaching the public to expect these screens, this collection of screens, to not just be a bunch of different screens, but the screen. That's the source of truth. That's the visual voice of commerce and culture in our cities. I mean, when we're out and about, we are so highly visual, I would say that we are picture prone. We're picture prone. And the creative payload of digital out of home and all out of home is like a photobomb that goes off in our head. And when it's relevant, when we have that perfect merger of content and context, it sticks. It stays. We remember it. We talk about it. It becomes part of our lexicon. I mean, when you tell people you work in the out-of-home business or as a brand you bought some billboards, don't they all have a billboard story? I remember I saw this board somewhere one day and it was so funny and yada, yada, yada. That's what's at our disposal. And I think if we back off for a minute and worry a little bit less about what format it is and exactly how we measured it, and is it this, is it that, all these things that the public doesn't even think about. And remember that the digital out-of-home revolution is more powerful, more socially, contextually, economically important than the TV revolution was in the 50s. And the last bit on that, when the war in Ukraine broke out, suddenly, all over the planet, digital out-of-home screens were switched to blue and yellow with a message in support of the Ukraine. That happened organically, without instruction. There was no media plan. It just happened everywhere, overnight. The Ferrari is idling in the parking lot. So there's my opening speech. That's what I woke up inspired with this morning. Now, these examples I have to share with you are very humble, very simple, but they're all three in some ways about context. Some of them mix static and digital. Some of them happen very quickly, others over time, but I'll share these briefly. Whoops, let me get this here. The first one, a brand we work with, Arc'teryx. It's outside activewear, people who go skiing, mountain climbing, things like that. They had this epic footage, people going down a mountaintop in the snow. And the question was, how do you bring that to the city? How do you create these digital canvases that, like, in an urban environment, suddenly open you up into this big, exciting world that's full of energy and room and clear, big blue skies? And it had to happen over a very short period of time, just a week. So this utilized projections and big digital screens. So that juxtaposition of creating a window into the big world of nature in an urban environment, that creates some intrigue, right? And a great quote I heard, and this wasn't mine, it was Tiffany Rolfe, who's the Global Creative Officer of RGA. She said that out of home provides a way in, whereas other media often is seen as in the way. And it's kind of cool when you think about it, because when you're out and about, you have that moment of serendipity and discovery, and there's out of home just politely minding its business. And if it connects with you, if it rewards you for your attention, if it gives you a moment of just, it's additive somehow, it's beautiful to look at, it asks a question, you answer, it makes sense to you, it gives you directional information, it tells you about, hey, the team won the game tonight, I get a free treat, right? Whatever it might be, that's a way in. I don't wake up in the morning with a list of things to do that calls out consume irrelevant out-of-home media, but I will consume a message if it makes sense to me. It's a window, a way in. This next campaign was OAAA Media Plan of the Year award winner. This was for Zola, a wedding planning site. The challenge here was they had a lot of data points, a lot of nuggets of information they wanted to speak to. And some of it was long form, so we used printed static for that in a high dwell time environment so you could read the long form, and then grab pieces of the messaging and use digital, in this case taxi tops, and part of it to have the right contextual locations pay it off. So here's the long form, all the things you think and worry about when you're planning for your wedding. So pedestrian eye level dwell time in the inner city, in the core, in different locations featuring different nuggets of what you're planning for. And in this case on digital taxi tops, speaking about carrot cut and clarity right in front of a jewelry store. So it only fired off right in front of those stores. Talking about popping the question at JFK before you make your trip, right at JFK. And then of course the obligatory Central Park photo right in front of Central Park. And there were many, many more of these. So you had a mix of long-form creative messaging, printed, digital, that was highly contextual. And this created a dramatic increase in website visitations and conversions. Lastly, for Glossier, another award winner, they wanted to announce new product, do a product demo, and also get people to go to their new store. And so a lot of it was done underground. There was above ground as well, which I'm not showing here. So they had this sticker motif, which we were able to extend beyond the poster onto the walls of the train station. On the posters, different creative mixing. And then this was really fascinating. On the live boards and live cards in the New York subway, do essentially a product demo with normal people just putting on the makeup, running during the morning commute. So it became very accessible. You could look at it and see yourself in there. And I'll play the video. So these are inside the subway cars. It's very honest, clean, accessible demonstration. Same thing here in the corridors. That was a very unique way to use the medium for a different purpose than pure advertising. And then extending it, in this case, branded coffee mugs, and showing up in all kinds of different places. So think about this. If I could leave you with anything, and I know, Steve, we're going to talk some more. Digital out of home will be more important societally, economically, contextually than the television revolution. And we serve the people space. Thank you.
Grab a chair, Rick. I want to take you back to that proposition. I'm not going to argue about TV because
you can argue about it.
No,
okay.
well, because
I want to start the argument.
because
That's what I'm here for.
I'm a good historian, and I know the history hasn't been written yet, so we don't know. But but first of all, by the way, I don't want to let it pass that the Glossier piece impressed me especially because it thinks about context in a somewhat different way. It's not just place, but it's human context. You're doing that right after the women riding the subway have just done that ritual, which I think was really fascinating, is that you're touching an experience and you're using that space and that time and that commute time to connect with something that is in the immediate experience of half the people on that train.
No doubt, and it demonstrated that there's so many creative ways to use the medium because of the access and immediacy of being digital, the ability to run video. That's why we're idling like a Ferrari in a parking lot right now.
Now, so I'm going to counter your TV comparison with radio, because the history of radio actually tracks a little more closely to digital out of home, I think, because TV came baked in with a business model and a broadcast model that it got from radio, and radio had to invent that. In wartime, in World War I, radio was a one-to-one medium. It was used by the military. In fact, in the U.S., shut down all radio communications, in the U.S. during the war, because they were concerned that it was going to be used for espionage. And after the war, the sense was that this was going to be a military vehicle. Within just those 5-6 years, radio not only became all these local towers all over the place and local markets, but nobody was imagining it as even a broadcast medium, let alone one that would be networked nationwide. But it was only within those 5 years that people reimagined what this technology could be, these little pods, these individuals, we have screens, as a network that by the early 1930s was broadcasting the presidential address across the entire nation simultaneously. That was something that was imagined from a technology that nobody anticipated. And I think that digital out of home, in some sense, could be following that same pattern. It starts as these little pods, quite separate from each other. But this idea is you're in a public space that actually could be knit together into a broadcast medium.
There's no doubt. I mean, we are just at, what's that called? There was a book I read, The Singularity, that called this phase the confusion prior to the clarity.
Right.
We have the technology, it's landed in front of us, and now we're trying to figure out what to do with it. And I was inspired to something that Albert had said, that we need to assert our will and be undeniable and stalk. Your words, Albert. and it's not just stalking opportunity, but it's stalking potential. Right? And right now, all we have is this reference of printed billboards. Saying, well, we printed them, and that's how we did it. Now we have these digital ones where we can do a whole bunch all at once. But the purpose and opportunity is different. You know, one unexpected outcome that happened because of technology and social media was that when out of home first saw social happening, we didn't know that suddenly some brands would do campaigns purely for the social B-roll, right? We didn't know that people would walk down the street, see a piece of out of home they love, digital or print, and go, hey, I need to capture that and share that on my social. An unexpected outcome. So there'll be many, many more.
Well, but let's make this concrete, because there are some places in some localities where we're starting to get the glimpses of what a model like this would look like, where we're starting to think about these boards as part of a public space.
Yes.
That could actually work in partnership with civic organizations or government. I think in LA we're starting to see it. Why don't you know more about this than I am, but it seemed intriguing to me that we're starting to see the glimpses of a model emerge where business and government could actually work together, and these things could be knit together.
That was a beautiful segue, by the way.
Oh, right.
Well done. So,
again, I tried.
You're speaking to a project that I was consulting on a couple years ago for the city of West Hollywood, which is the Sunset Strip. And they were slow to the game as an epicenter of big out-of-home to allow conversions to digital screens. There's 111 billboards and walls on the 1.6-mile S-curve of the Sunset Strip, which is the city of West Hollywood. And up until very recently, only a couple of them were digital screens. The city wanted more, but they wanted to go into business with the out-of-home companies and make it relevant to the public realm. That was their goal. And so where it's ended up is there's about 30 executions that have been approved, about a half a dozen have been built, and in every case, 1/6 of the messaging is permanently for public art. There's revenue sharing with the city. Each installation has to have an architectural component, has to, quote, add to the public realm, whether creating green space, creating public bathrooms, fixing the roadway. So now you have this merger, right, of the public, of the city, of the out-of-home companies, and the money from the brands feeding all of that. And I think that speaks to this changing relationship between people and cities and digital out-of-home. These screens will become the source of every piece of information. Public safety, wayfinding, information, art, commerce. And people will continue to see that and understand, hey, these screens have everything for me, and they're immediate and they're newsy, as you called it. They're rewarding me for my attention. They're creating value in the moment. We're going to have so many exciting ways to learn how to master context.
And again, we're going back to the original radio model where the government understood it owned the spectrum, the public space, and then started licensing the spectrum with some caveats and requirements that included public service. And we saw that bleed into TV as well. So this idea that this is a medium that could be co-owned and that there would be certain social and civic obligations tied to it.
Exactly from that. And what's very interesting is that the public pushback on new big digital screens has diminished the more they're sharing, right? The more they're sharing revenue and benefit to the public, the more it's symbiotic, then the public sees that. They understand this has value to me in multiple ways. I want more of it. I think that model it's the new model. It's a beautiful model. It's already happening in some other cities. The Downtown Art District in Denver does it that way. Other cities, Baltimore, are looking to do it. I just consulted for the city of San Jose on this. So more and more and more you're going to see this happening. That's why it's going to lead to satisfy eventually that headline statement I gave.
Right, and we could see a set of public expectations coming to these screens, an Amber Alert, voting day reminders, State of the Union address, all screens, just get it.
Which in the end makes the screen more valuable for the advertiser.
Yes, I think absolutely, because it's validating it in a very special way. Anybody have any questions of this or want to make their own points about this idea, about some of these ideas?
There we go.
So sorry, Michelle Capasso yesterday.
We all know each other by now.
The Glossier example was amazing. And I think it taps into exactly what we said in terms of how do we turn these units into informational and content. And so the videos that you used were basically capturing this idea of watching me put my makeup on is massive online. Like it's just such a huge moment, like social moment. Were those And it ties into, we talked a little bit about how do you bring influencer content out into this channel, because I think that's where the content could really come from and be really interesting. Were those ones that were content that was specifically created for those units, or were those things that you guys had just kind of captured out in the wild? Or?
You know, I'm not 100% sure, to tell you the truth. I know that the content was developed simultaneously to the campaign being put together in terms of buying the space, but I think it also had some other uses.
Because that's, I think, you know, Steve, to your point, in terms of like, how do you make it authentic? How are you providing value? How are you telling a story? Is getting that little bit of content out there, which I thought that was amazing. So,
Rick, I'm curious if the way you're thinking about the future of digital out of home means that as an industry, you need to think differently than maybe previous digital channels have about how they share information, how they partner with each other, how they think about a partnership with government. Because, you know, in all of these different channels, especially back in the dark days of the early 2000s when we weren't sure if the internet really was going to make it,
Right.
one of the problems was we couldn't standardize advertising because there were all these little startups who thought they had the better way, they had the better screen and the better format, and the IAB sort of had to wrangle them all together and convince them that no, this industry isn't going to grow unless you guys get together. But in this space, I wonder if the digital out-of-home industry has to recognize you will grow if you start partnering with those very people that, as good old capitalists, you think you don't want to partner with. And you don't want to have their noses in your stuff. But that maybe this actually is one of the best ways to accelerate the industry, is to think differently about it, the way it relates to government, the way as an industry that relates to each other.
Sure. Look, it's out in the public space. You're not going to grow unless you're in business with the public. That's all there is to it. And what's caused a lot of friction up until very recently was some of the old habits of the out-of-home industry, which was historically adversarial with city planning departments, compliance, right, that real estate piece. But that's fading away. I think the other thing that's happening is we see a lot of new energy and new risk, ad tech companies, people from other types of media getting excited and attracted to out-of-home and digital out-of-home, and they're bringing that fresh thinking. And then the out-of-home stalwarts, the legacy people from the business, we're slowly understanding that we need that input. We need to understand it differently. We need a client like Glossier to show us, hey, wait a minute, this is a totally different way to use this. Didn't think of that, right? That's what makes it very, very exciting, but it's going to be a collective energy that does it. And part of it is being in partnership with the public sector.
Can't think of a better way to end. Rick, thanks, man.
Oh, my pleasure.